Hello there and welcome back to the Sleep Science. Tonight you're not in your bedroom anymore, you're standing barefoot on the damp earth that still remembers an extinction. The air feels heavy, as if the planet itself just exhaled after holding its breath for far too long. Around you the land stretches in silence, a silence not empty but waiting. You probably won't survive this walk. Let's be real, you're not exactly built for a world where even the ferns look like they'd fight back if you tried to snack on them. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and the local time. I always love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The dawn of the Jurassic does not arrive with fireworks or trumpets. It slides in quietly, like fog rolling across low hills. You trudge forward through a landscape that looks wounded but alive, scarred but determined. Just a few million years earlier, the very end of the Triassic period, the Earth hosted a mass extinction event, one of the 5 great die-offs in Earth's history. Roughly 3/4 of all species vanished. Many large amphibians that once dominated river systems simply faded out, and strange reptiles that prowled the land disappeared. The exact cause is still debated. Some point to massive volcanic eruptions along the Central Atlantic magmatic province. Others to shifts in ocean chemistry, and some historians of Earth's climate still argue whether sudden carbon dioxide spikes or gradual warming sealed the fate of those unlucky creatures. What matters for you, standing here in this fresh chapter, is that the stage is being reset. The survivors crawl, fly and creep across this altered canvas, and you watch them begin to claim the silence as their own. You notice how the ground feels firmer than in the Triassic lowlands. Volcanic rock, black and porous, juts up in strange ridges, forming natural barriers that guide rivers like stubborn lines on a map. The rivers themselves carry new nutrients, the legacy of ash and lava broken down into soil that plants are eager to exploit. Already, carpets of moss and early cycads blanket the damp areas, weaving emerald patches across the otherwise bare terrain. The light is different too. The sun, filtered through a wetter atmosphere, feels both hotter and softer at once, as though you're wrapped in a greenhouse dome. Clouds gather high and white, not yet the monstrous thunderheads of later Jurassic monsoon seasons, but precursors, promising that water cycles are ramping up. It makes you sweat almost instantly, which is inconvenient, because laundry detergent won't be invented for about 200 million years. As you walk, you hear the sound of insects, not the familiar buzzing of mosquitoes or the whine of flies you know today, but a deeper, droning hum. Giant dragonflies skim above ponds, their wings like panes of stained glass catching sunlight in flickering patterns. They're not as colossal as the metre-wide beasts of the Carboniferous, but they still command your attention, swooping past your head with a rush of air that tickles your ears. And yes, you flinch because nothing in you wants to deal with prehistoric bug bites. On the horizon, shapes move. Low, four-legged reptiles lumber across open ground. They are not the towering giants yet. These are early dinosaurs, cautious and small compared to what's coming. They pause to nibble ferns, then lift narrow heads to scan for danger. Their tails sway like counterbalances, keeping them steady, reminding you of gymnasts warming up before a high-beam routine. Some bear hints of feathers, though not for flight, just tufts for warmth or display, little experiments of evolution that will matter much later. You press on and find evidence of survival etched into the very ground. Burrows carved into hillsides, left by early mammal-like creatures, mark the resilience of the tiny. These shrew-sized survivors, ancestors of your modern furry companions, lived almost invisibly in this dinosaur-ruled stage. They darted out at night, scavenged insects, and retreated quickly, their lives built on speed and secrecy. You crouch to peer at one of their tunnels, imagining the warmth of a small family huddled together, surviving simply by staying unnoticed. It's in this humble persistence that the true flavour of the Jurassic dawn emerges. The world is quieter than it will be, yes, but it carries a low, steady heartbeat. Each step you take reminds you that Earth doesn't reset like a video game. It limps, it heals, it grows again in slow, stubborn increments. A quirky detail you notice. Along the riverbank, patches of stromatolites, layered colonies of cyanobacteria, still rise like rock-hard pancakes. They've been here for billions of years, long before any dinosaur even dreamed of stomping across the land, and they continue their slow business of oxygen making. It's a funny kind of immortality, almost like the Earth keeps a few comfort foods on the menu, no matter how often it changes the restaurant decor. As you wander further, dusk settles. The temperature dips slightly, though the humidity clings stubbornly to your skin. Shadows stretch long across volcanic ridges, and the first sounds of nighttime emerge. You hear the croak of amphibians tucked into wetlands, survivors themselves, though fewer than before. A sudden splash startles you. A fish-like reptile, or maybe a juvenile ichthyosaur, breaking the surface of a shallow bay before diving back. These creatures, streamlined like dolphins, claim the water while land still decides who its champions will be. You pause to take in the enormity of where you are. The year, if you had a calendar, would read around 201 million BCE. Humanity is so impossibly far away that you feel like an intruder here. Yet the smell of damp soil, the brush of ferns against your hand, the hum of insects, they anchor you. This world is real. It is dangerous and alien, yes. But it is also alive in a way that feels deeply familiar. The same air you breathe now once swirled through the nostrils of these early dinosaurs. The same rivers cut their way down valleys. The same stars blinked overhead. One more thing catches your attention before you rest. A faint trail of footprints fossilized in drying mud. 3 toes, bird-like, pressed deep into the earth. The prints march forward in a line, fading into the distance. You place your own foot beside one. It dwarfs you, yet you know these belong not to the future titans, but to modest, lean predators. Still, the comparison is sobering. You are small here, you are fragile, and yet for tonight, you walk on anyway. The ground beneath you rumbles, not with the footsteps of dinosaurs this time, but with the groaning, grinding voice of the planet itself. The Jurassic Earth is restless, and you can feel it in every step, like standing on the lid of a pot just starting to boil. You're walking across what was once the heart of Pangaea, that giant supercontinent which bundled nearly all landmasses into one colossal puzzle piece. By the early Jurassic, cracks have begun to spread across its face. You peer into those fractures and realise they're not small scratches. They are wounds that will eventually tear continents apart, sending them drifting toward the arrangement you know today. And yes, it's happening at the pace of fingernails growing, which isn't exactly action movie speed, but when you're talking about entire continents, that's basically breakneck. The Central Atlantic magmatic province, the same volcanic system tied to the Triassic extinction, still belches lava, though less apocalyptic than before. You imagine fountains of molten rock spraying into the sky, hardening into black plains that shimmer with heat. These volcanic pulses don't just reshape the surface, they pump gases into the atmosphere, carbon dioxide among them, keeping the world warm and steamy. You dab your forehead with your sleeve, but it's no use. Jurassic Earth is essentially one gigantic sauna, and you're the reluctant guest who forgot a towel. As you hike up a ridge, you stop to catch your breath and look out. The view is staggering. A shallow seaway has begun to seep into the cracks of Pangaea, forming early gulfs and bays. Future oceans are being sketched in watery outlines, and you stand in the middle of the sketchbook. This creeping sea divides land slowly, like a knife dragging through soft clay, hinting at the day when the Atlantic will open more wide. Historians of geology still argue whether the split was triggered mainly by rising magma pushing upward, or by the sheer stretching of plates pulling apart. But either way, you're watching a planet learn how to fall into pieces. You descend toward one of these new coastlines, where sand dunes meet the fizzing hiss of waves. The air is salty, but it's not the briny Atlantic you know. It's younger, rawer, infused with volcanic minerals. Along the shore, early marine reptiles bask like scaly sunbathers, while in the shallows, fish dart nervously through the churn. Some of those fish look oddly familiar, echoing shapes you might see in modern aquariums. It's a reminder that while continents dance wildly, the oceans often hold steady in their evolutionary rhythms. Moving inland again, you cross great plains marked by fault lines, the literal scars of tectonic stress. The ground shifts slightly under your weight, not enough to topple you, but enough to make you think twice about standing still too long. Earthquakes ripple through these regions frequently. Nothing skyscraper toppling, since skyscrapers won't exist for another 200 million years, but enough to rattle your teeth if you aren't careful. You picture a sauropod, those future skyscrapers on legs, trying to keep balance during a tremor, his long neck swaying like a nervous metronome. Funny, but also a reminder that nature is boss here. You pass a cliff face where fresh lava flows have cooled, layering shiny basalt columns into geometric stacks. They look like oversized honeycombs, perfectly angular yet entirely natural. You trail your hand along the ridges, feeling the warmth that still lingers. Late in human history, similar formations will inspire legends of giants stacking stones, like the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. Here, though, there are no myths yet, just a restless planet flexing its muscles. At the base of the cliff, you notice a shallow lagoon forming in one of the tectonic depressions. The water gleams in the sunlight, tinted green from algae blooms. Early amphibians and small reptiles patrol its edges, hunting insects buzzing overhead. A quirky detail: in some of these rift valleys, saltwater and freshwater mix, creating unique environments where only the strangest, most adaptable species thrive. It's the Jurassic version of a hipster cafe, exclusive, experimental, and not for everyone's taste. The night creeps in again, and you find yourself camping under the glow of stars that look almost identical to your modern night ski. You remember that the continents are shifting, yes, but the stars are moving too, slowly repositioning themselves in galactic choreography. The Milky Way still arcs above you, steady and bright, though constellations have drifted so far that your modern stargazing app would just throw up its hands in confusion. You trace random shapes instead. One star cluster looks suspiciously like a sauropod neck, another like the curl of an ammonite shell. Maybe humans didn't invent constellations so much as inherit the habit from this ancient wonder. Your sleep is interrupted by the low rumble of distant thunder, not from the sky but from beneath the ground. Somewhere far away, tectonic plates grind harder, sparking volcanic outbursts. The earth shakes for a few seconds, enough to jolt you upright. You grin nervously because, honestly, the Jurassic is like living on a cracked phone screen. The pieces are holding together for now, but you know it won't last forever. As dawn breaks, you trek along a rising escarpment, where vegetation grips to the rocky slopes. The plants are thicker here than in the early Jurassic plains. Conifers stand like soldiers, while ferns crowd into shady pockets. These plants don't mind the shifting ground. In fact, they thrive in volcanic soils enriched by mineral deposits. You pick up a fallen pine cone, surprisingly familiar in your palm, though slightly larger and rougher. It's a small comfort in a world where almost everything else feels foreign. From your vantage point, you see it clearly now, Pangaea's slow unravelling. To the west, a young Atlantic Ocean is a mere toddler, splashing in its tectonic playpen. To the east, the Tethys Sea sprawls wide and glittering, a tropical stretch that will one day shrink into the Mediterranean. Between these waters, the land stretches and strains, tugged apart by forces you can't see but can definitely feel. You realise that the Earth you know, the one divided into neat continents with oceans in between, is just a phase in an ongoing experiment. Here in the Jurassic, the experiment is mid-process, messy and beautiful. You're standing on moving ground, watching the blueprint of the modern world being drawn in lava and water. And as you take one last look at the cracked, restless earth beneath your feet, you understand the dinosaurs may dominate the surface, but it's the continents themselves, the slow, unstoppable drift of land and sea, that truly set the stage for everything to come. You inhale, and the air feels like a warm blanket pressed a little too tightly against your skin. This Jurassic sky is no ordinary ceiling. It's heavy with water vapour, thickened by the gases still seeping from restless volcanoes and the tectonic rift splitting the world apart. The atmosphere clings to you, more humid than any tropical greenhouse you've visited, and you can almost taste the minerals drifting invisibly through it. You cough once, half expecting a spa attendant to hand you a eucalyptus towel, but instead a dragonfly the size of your hand buzzes past. Unimpressed by your discomfort, the climate of the Jurassic is a paradox. On one hand, it's hot, steamy and lush, making the world feel like an eternal summer vacation with no sunscreen. On the other, it's unpredictable, punctuated by storms that appear with theatrical suddenness. You walk across a plain of cycads and notice the horizon blurring into haze, signalling the birth of one such storm. The air grows heavy, and your ears pop slightly from the pressure change. Clouds gather into mountains of white and grey, climbing higher and higher until they scrape the upper atmosphere. You tilt your head back, dizzy from the sheer scale, and wonder if clouds back home ever looked this intimidating, or if you've simply never paid them such careful attention. The warmth you feel is no accident. With carbon dioxide levels several times higher than today's, the greenhouse effect keeps the planet balmy even at the poles. Snow, ice, forget it. If you somehow trek to the Jurassic North or South, you'd find forests where in your time there are frozen wastes. This is a world where crocodile relatives could sunbathe in high latitudes, which sounds like a children's cartoon setup but was actually real. Scientists still debate whether global temperatures were evenly warm or whether there were subtle gradients, cooler at higher latitudes, warmer near the equator. The evidence is smeared across fossilized tree rings and oxygen isotopes in ancient shells, each whispering different versions of the story. As the storm finally breaks, rain pours in heavy curtains. Each drop feels larger, almost stinging against your skin, though that might be your imagination amplifying the drama. Rivers swell instantly, turning calm channels into raging torrents. You take shelter under the canopy of a tall conifer, its branches flexing under the deluge. Thunder rolls across the sky like boulders tumbling down a canyon, and lightning flashes bright enough to sear your vision. You think about how dinosaurs must have responded to such storms. Did massive sauropods panic, stampeding through forests, or did they simply endure, tails swaying like pendulums until the rain eased? No fossil tells you this, so you make a guess. Probably annoyed, but too big to care. When the clouds finally pass, the world glitters. Every fern frond is jeweled with water droplets, every low puddle alive with ripples as insects skim across its surface. The smell is intoxicating, a mixture of wet earth, resinous trees, and the faint sulphur tang that still sneaks up from volcanic vents. You breathe deeply, though it's a bit like inhaling through a steamy shower with someone boiling broccoli in the next room. Not unpleasant, but layered. Walking along a ridge, you come across something stranger still. A patch of soil pocked with shallow depressions, almost like someone pressed their fingers repeatedly into soft clay. At first, you think it might be footprints, but these are more delicate, arranged in looping spirals. Upon closer inspection, you realize they're raindrop impressions, fossilized in the moment of impact. Millions of years later, paleontologists will marvel at similar finds, using them to estimate rainfall intensity and even ancient atmospheric density. Right now, though, you just marvel at how the sky literally writes itself into stone. The air is alive, not just with moisture, but with sound. Insects hum continuously, a kind of background symphony that fills every quiet moment. Some call this white noise of the Jurassic, though to you it sounds more like an orchestra tuning endlessly, waiting for a conductor who never shows. Overhead, a pterosaur glides effortlessly, riding warm thermals spiraling upward from the sun-baked ground. Its wings stretch wider than your outstretched arms, casting a fleeting shadow across your face. You wonder how it feels to live in a world where the very air is a playground, thick enough with rising currents to lift bodies into sustained flight. As the day deepens, you notice a curious quirk of this atmosphere. Sunsets seem richer, more theatrical than what you're used to. With more particles and moisture in the air, sunlight scatters in shades of crimson and gold, painting the sky in wide, dramatic strokes. You stop walking just to stare, half hypnotized, while the forest behind you glows like it's been set on fire. For a moment, you forget about the insects, the humidity, the constant threat of predators. For a moment, you're just a tourist in one of Earth's grandest light shows. When night falls, the climate reveals another of its tricks. Instead of cooling sharply, the air stays warm, holding on to heat like a thick quilt. You lie on your back in a fern bed, fanning yourself with a leaf bigger than a beach towel, and think about how strange it would feel to live here permanently. Humans are creatures of temperature variety. Summers, winters, brisk autumn mornings. Here, it's as if someone pressed repeat on midsummer, with occasional storms to shake things up. Perhaps that's why reptiles thrived. They loved this endless warmth, while mammals kept to shadows, too small and fragile to compete under the glaring, humid sun. A quirky tidbit creeps into your mind as you doze. Some researchers suggest that cloud cover in the Jurassic might have reached astonishing heights, with towering cumulonimbus formations stretching twice as high as those today, thanks to a thicker, wetter atmosphere. Imagine storms so tall they brush against the stratosphere, visible from hundreds of kilometers away. You chuckle softly. If Instagram existed back then, storm chasers would never sleep. And as you drift towards slumber yourself, you recognize that this air, this climate, this restless, water-laden sky, is the true stagehand of the Jurassic story. The dinosaurs may strut, the oceans may shimmer, but but it's the sky above and the air you breathe that script the rhythm of every life on this planet. You wake to the sound of dripping water, not from last night's storm, but from dew sliding off leaves so enormous they might as well be umbrellas. The forest of the Jurassic stretches above you like a cathedral of green, its ceiling built not from carved stone but from conifers, cycads and ginkgos swaying gently in the morning breeze. You rub your eyes, and the sheer verticality makes you dizzy. These trees don't just grow, they tower, some pushing more than 30 meters toward the sky. You tilt your head back so far you nearly stumble, half expecting to see stained glass between the branches. Instead, it's sunlight filtering through needles and fronds, casting mosaics of shadow on the ground. This forest is not the hardwood paradise you're used to. No maples, no oaks, no flowering fruit trees. Angiosperms, the flowering plants, haven't quite shown up yet. Instead, you get gymnosperms, cone-bearers, the reigning royalty of the Jurassic botanical world. Pines and fir-like relatives dominate uplands, while cycads, plants that look like a mix between palm trees and pineapples, stand in orderly clusters, their stiff leaves rattling softly when the wind runs through them. Ginkgo trees, with their fan-shaped leaves, punctuate the greenery, an odd aesthetic choice from nature that somehow works. You pluck one leaf to study it, tracing its veins like the delicate folds of a paper fan, and marvel that ginkgos will survive nearly unchanged all the way to your modern city sidewalks. The forest floor feels spongy beneath your bare feet, thick with ferns. Their fronds spread like carpets, overlapping and weaving into mats that rustle as you walk through. Some tower taller than you, forming their own understory. Insects buzz around them in constant traffic, landing briefly before darting off again. You brush past and catch the smell of damp resin, sharp and earthy, like pine needles after a rainstorm. It fills your lungs, grounding you in this alien yet familiar place. A mainstream fact sneaks into your wandering thoughts. This era is when the first true evergreen forests appear, reshaping global ecosystems. Their needle-like leaves allow them to thrive in drier uplands where ferns and cycads struggle, expanding the reach of green life. You find yourself admiring their quiet resilience, as though they knew from the start they were in it for the long haul. You pause by a stream winding through the forest, watching it twist around roots as thick as your arm. Along its banks grow horsetails, ancient plants that once towered into the sky during the Carboniferous, but are now reduced to modest stalks, though still taller than you in some patches. Their jointed stems click softly when the breeze jostles them, like bamboo chimes. You snap off a piece, curious, and notice its fibrous texture. No wonder ancient humans, millions of years later, will use horsetail silica as a natural scrub brush. For now, though, you set it down before you turn into the first dishwasher in history. Something moves above. You look up and spot a small lizard-like reptile clinging to the bark of a conifer. It scurries upward with surprising agility, vanishing into the shadows of higher branches. You smile, realizing that life in this forest doesn't just exist on the ground, it thrives at every level, from the soil to the canopy. Even the air is alive, full of spores drifting like invisible confetti, waiting for the right damp place to settle. As you wander deeper, the soundscape shifts. Insects still drone, but you hear an undertone of creaks and groans, the trees themselves speaking. Their trunks sway in the wind, and the sound is low, almost like whale song carried through wood. You place your palm on one and feel the vibration steady and deep, as though the forest itself hums with life. It's not a stretch to imagine that this sound might lull you to sleep if you lay against the trunk long enough. And of course, forests aren't just backdrops. They shape the very evolution of the creatures here. Small dinosaurs weave between cycads, nibbling at fronds. Some rear on hind legs to reach higher leaves, while others shuffle low to the ground, blending with shadows. Predators lurk nearby, using the cover of trees for ambush. Without these towering sanctuaries, the balance between herbivore and carnivore would collapse. Historians still argue whether sauropods evolved such towering necks mainly to feed from these lofty conifers or to sweep across wide areas of ground foliage. You lean toward the first idea as you crane your neck upward again, realizing just how much greenery is out of reach to smaller creatures. You stumble across a fallen conifer, its trunk thick enough to rival a subway tunnel. Moss and early fungi already creep along its bark, breaking it down into soil for the next generation of growth. You sit on it, legs dangling, and imagine how many cycles of fall and regrowth have already passed unseen. In a quirky twist, some scientists suggest that these early fungal partnerships with trees may have dramatically sped up the recycling of carbon, shaping climate patterns. In other words, mushrooms have been world changers far longer than pizza toppings. The air darkens slightly as evening approaches, and you realise how dense this forest truly is. Sunlight filters in narrow shafts now, catching particles in golden beams. It feels almost sacred, like you're walking through the nave of an ancient temple. You half expect to stumble on stone altars, but here, the altars are seed cones, lying in clusters like offerings. Some are small enough to fit in your palm, while others are massive, heavy as bowling balls, their scales hard and sharp. You step carefully, not wanting to roll an ankle on one of nature's primitive booby traps. As you make camp for the night, the forest reveals one last surprise. Fireflies, early glowing insects, spark faintly in the underbrush. The glow isn't as intense as the light shows, you know, but it's enough to cast an eerie, enchanting shimmer. You lie back against a fern bed, watching the blinking rhythm and listening to the forest sigh around you. The Jurassic Cathedral has closed its doors for the night, leaving you drowsy under its vaulted canopy of green. And somewhere in the darkness, unseen but certainly aware of you, the forest keeps breathing, waiting for dawn to paint its leaves gold again. The ground shakes gently beneath your feet, not from an earthquake this time, but from something heavier, slower and far more alive. You part the curtain of cycads and ferns, and there, across an open plain, you see them, the first true giants of the Jurassic, sauropods. Their long necks rise like living towers, swaying against the hazy blue horizon as they strip foliage from treetops. It's as if the forest you just left has decided to stand up and walk. They move in groups, their column-like legs pressing deep, rhythmic impressions into the damp soil. Each step vibrates through your chest. A low bass you feel more than hear. You're instantly aware of your size, or rather, your lack of it. Compared to them, you are no more significant than the insects buzzing at their ankles, yet the sight is mesmerising. Their tails sweep behind them like enormous whips, balancing the weight of their impossibly long necks. For a moment you wonder if they could knock you flat with a single lazy flick, the way a bored cat might swat at a toy. Spoiler, they absolutely could. You crouch low, studying one of the massive creatures as it bends its neck to pluck greenery. Its head looks small compared to its body, almost comically so, like someone glued a garden shovel onto a construction crane. The nostrils sit high on its skull, perhaps for easier breathing while half submerged in water, or so early paleontologists once thought. Modern debates suggest otherwise, that these giants were mostly land dwellers, with air sac systems inside their bodies that kept them light enough to roam uplands. Historians of paleontology still argue whether these air sacs evolved primarily for cooling in the Jurassic heat, or to lighten their massive skeletons. Either way, you're glad for them, otherwise the Earth might have snapped under the weight. The sauropods you see are probably early members of the lineage, creatures like Volcanodon or Barapasaurus, not yet the colossal Brachiosaurus or Diplodocus of later Jurassic fame. But even these early models dwarf anything else around them. Their hides glisten with a pebbled texture, grey-green in colour, mottled to blend with the ferns. Small pterosaur-like creatures circle overhead, opportunists waiting to scavenge insects disturbed by the giant's lumbering steps. As you trail alongside them at a safe distance, you notice how they interact with their environment. Their necks sweep in graceful arcs, clearing entire swathes of foliage in minutes. Smaller herbivorous dinosaurs scurry in their wake, nibbling the leftovers, like kids following an ice cream truck hoping for dropped sprinkles. You realise as this is a perfect example of niche partitioning. Different creatures sharing the same ecosystem by feeding at different levels, from ground to canopy. At one point, two sauropods pause and face each other. They raise their necks high, swaying slowly, almost like dancers mirroring one another. Then, without warning, they slam them together with a thunderous crack that echoes across the plain. You flinch, heart pounding, convinced the fight will escalate into chaos. But after a few more dramatic clashes, one lowers its neck submissively and wanders off, leaving the other to strut proudly toward the best patch of conifers. It dawns on you that you've just witnessed an early version of a dominance display, a prehistoric argument over food and maybe over mates. The ground nearby offers a quirkier detail. You stumble across enormous piles of dung, each mound steaming faintly in the humid air. Flies buzz enthusiastically above them, delighted at the buffet. You wrinkle your nose, but then remember, this isn't just waste, it's fertilizer, the secret ingredient that keeps the Jurassic forest thriving. Whole ecosystems depend on these giants' digestive leftovers. Later paleontologists will even find fossilized dung called coprolites, filled with plant fragments that reveal exactly what these creatures ate. You're tempted to poke it with a stick, but quickly decide that some curiosities are best left untested. Night approaches slowly, and the herd begins to settle. The sauropods bunch together, their tails forming a protective barrier against would-be predators. The sound of their breathing fills the dusk, deep and resonant, like bellows feeding a great invisible fire. You imagine sleeping among them would feel oddly safe, as if their sheer size kept nightmares at bay. Then again, you'd probably be flattened by a casual roll in the night, so maybe best to keep your distance. Still, you linger, lying on your back in the grass, watching silhouettes of their necks sway against the fading light. Stars prick the sky, tiny and fragile compared to the living skyscrapers beside you. You can't help but laugh quietly. Here you are, in a world where trees walk and mountains breathe. The Jurassic has a way of making even the impossible feel routine, and as sleep creeps in, lulled by the steady rumble of giant hearts beating in the dark. You realise you've just shared the plane with beings so vast they make your existence feel like a whisper. Yet somehow, the whisper is enough. The plane is quieter now, the giants you watched last night fading into the distance like grey mountains that decided to walk away. But quiet does not mean safe. As dawn rises over the ferns, you notice a different kind of movement, a flicker at the edge of your vision. Fast, deliberate, and decidedly less gentle than the slow giants. These are the hunters of the Jurassic, smaller than sauropods but armed with speed, teeth, and a certain unsettling cleverness. You crouch low, brushing against damp cicads as a theropod prowls into view. Its body is sleek, built for running, balanced on two muscular legs with a long tail stretched out like a tightrope walker's pole. This particular predator might be something like Dilophosaurus, one of the early Jurassic carnivores. It's not enormous compared to what's coming later, but at 6 or 7 meters long, it could still turn you into a mid-morning snack without much trouble. You try not to breathe too loudly. The Dilophosaurus tilts its head, revealing a pair of thin, arching crests that run along the top of its skull. They're not weapons, too fragile for that, but probably display structures, bright with colour in ways you can only guess. Maybe crimson, maybe striped, maybe shimmering like a bird's feathers. Historians still argue whether these crests were meant to impress potential mates or intimidate rivals. Either way, you decide not to make eye contact just in case it interprets your admiration as a challenge. It moves with eerie grace, weaving between cicads in silence. Each clawed foot lands softly on the fern carpet, barely disturbing the leaves. You wonder if this predator relies more on ambush than on sheer pursuit, waiting for smaller herbivores to stray too far from the herd, and as if to confirm your suspicion, a rustle erupts nearby. A small ornithischian, no bigger than a large dog, darts from cover. The theropod explodes forward, jaws wide, and the chase lasts no more than a few seconds. Dust rises, ferns thrash, and then silence. You don't need to see the end to know how it went. The air smells faintly metallic afterward. A reminder that survival here is not romantic, not sanitized. It's sharp, brutal, necessary. Yet you can't help but admire the predator's efficiency. It takes what it needs. Nothing more, nothing less. In the Jurassic, there's no concept of cruelty or mercy, only balance. As you continue onward, more hunters reveal themselves. Smaller theropods move in packs, chirping and yipping like wild dogs, their voices surprisingly bird-like. You realise with a shiver that these are ancestors of modern birds, their sharp eyes and quick reflexes already honed for the skies they'll one day conquer. Some of them sport tufts of primitive feathers, not for flight yet, but for warmth, camouflage or display. A few even leap onto rocks, spreading their feathered arms wide, as if auditioning for a future role they don't know they're destined for. You stumble upon a kill site half hidden in the ferns. Bones scattered, ribs gnawed, and a skull cracked open for the marrow inside. Flies buzz thickly above it, while beetles scuttle in and out, feasting on scraps. You hesitate, stomach turning, but then notice something intriguing. The teeth marks etched into the bone. They're curved and sharp, perfect signatures of theropods. Millions of years from now, paleontologists will study such marks to identify predators and even reconstruct hunting behaviours. Right now, though, you just feel like you've accidentally walked into the Jurassic version of a crime scene. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. Early paleontologists once thought Dilophosaurus might have spat venom, thanks to the odd shape of its jaws. That myth even made it into movies, complete with frills and gooey poison sprays. Standing here, though, you see no evidence of that. Just a streamlined predator with no need for special effects. Nature doesn't always need Hollywood flair. Sometimes sharp teeth and good legs are plenty. The forest grows denser again as you step away from the plain and the sounds of predators fade into echoes. Yet the tension lingers. Every shadow looks sharper. Every rustle feels suspect. You catch yourself glancing behind more often, convinced that something with teeth is tracking your every move. Maybe it is. That's the unsettling truth. In the Jurassic, you're never truly alone. Evening comes and you climb onto a rocky outcrop to rest. From your vantage point, you can see them again, silhouettes of theropods moving below, weaving between trees, their bodies blending into the twilight. Their calls echo across the landscape, high-pitched and strange, like a mix between bird chirps and reptilian hisses. You wrap your arms around your knees, trying not to imagine what it would feel like to be caught in that circle of hunters. But as the stars emerge overhead, another thought comforts you. These predators, as frightening as they are part of the balance that allows giants to roam and forests to thrive. Without them, herds would swell, unchecked, stripping the land bare. Without them, the story of evolution might stall. The hunters are shadows, yes, but shadows are what give shape to the light. You close your eyes, listening to their distant calls, half lullaby, half warning. Sleep here is dangerous, Biyun. But oddly enough, you feel yourself drifting off, as if even the predators are simply part of the rhythm of this ancient world. The forest thins as you descend toward a shoreline, and the air shifts from resin and damp fern to the salty tang of the sea. It's not the Atlantic you know, not yet. It's a patchwork of young oceans and spreading rift valleys. The horizon seems wider here, as though the world has opened a window. Waves lap gently against the sand, but the water hides a realm that makes the land's dramas seem almost quiet. You crouch at the edge, letting foamy surf wash over your toes, and then you see it. A shadow gliding beneath the surface, long and elegant, like a ribbon of muscle and grace. It rises, breaks the surface with a smooth arch of its neck, and you're face to face with a plesiosaur. Its body is broad and paddle-shaped, designed for underwater flight, and its head, small, sharp-muzzled, snaps at fish darting too close. Watching it move is like watching a swan and a shark blended into one improbable creature. Further out, a different form breaches the waves. An ichthyosaur. Streamlined and powerful, it looks uncannily like a dolphin, though you remind yourself not to be fooled. This is no playful mammal. With eyes the size of dinner plates, it sees everything in these waters, hunting squid and fish with precision. You imagine it darting through schools of ammonites, snatching them with speed that makes even the fastest terrestrial predator seem clumsy. Historians still argue whether ichthyosaurs hunted in coordinated pods like modern dolphins or as solitary ambush specialists. Either way, you're not eager to test the theory firsthand. Closer to shore, you notice a tide pool shimmering with colour. Inside are ammonites, spiralled mollusks with shells that gleam in iridescent stripes. Some are small, coin-sized curiosities, while others grow as large as car tyres. They float serenely, their tentacles waving like tiny dancers. You pick up a discarded shell, tracing its ridges with your thumb. Millions of years from now, such fossils will become prized collector's items, mistaken for petrified snakes coiled into stone. For now, though, they're just another piece of the Jurassic puzzle. The seabed itself hums with life. Coral reefs spread like underwater cities, built slowly, polyp by polyp, until they form vast neighbourhoods for fish and invertebrates. These reefs gleam with sponges, crinoids and shellfish swaying gently in the current. You peer through the clear shallows and catch sight of a horseshoe crab trudging along the sand, its design so successful that it hasn't changed in hundreds of millions of years. You almost laugh. It's the Jurassic. And yet here's something you might accidentally step on during a modern beach trip. But the ocean is not only beautiful, it's theatrical. A shadow passes overhead. No, not a cloud, but the dorsal fin of something enormous. You squint, and your stomach clenches as a pliosaur surfaces, larger than any predator you've seen on land, This marine reptile commands the sea with jaws long enough to swallow you whole. Its presence silences even the gull-like cries of pterosaurs wheeling above. You step back instinctively, though you know it cannot reach you on land. Still, the thought of such a beast patrolling the depths makes the ground feel suddenly safer, even with theropods lurking nearby. You find a quiet perch on a rocky bluff, watching the sea change colour as the sun begins to lower. The water glows amber and rose, reflecting the fiery sky. Pterosaurs skim the surface, dipping beaks for fish before wheeling back upward. Some species are small, fluttering like oversized bats, while others soar with wingspans wide enough to cast moving shadows across entire tide pools. Their cries echo, sharp and metallic, blending with the roar of waves. A quirky detail catches your eye. On the beach, turtle-like reptiles haul themselves onto the sand. They're not turtles as you know them, but their lineage hints at the future. They dig shallow pits with stubby limbs, laying soft-shelled eggs that the sun will warm. You resist the urge to approach, not wanting to spook them back into the surf. It's remarkable to realise that while giant reptiles dominate both land and sea, quiet pioneers like these are laying the groundwork for creatures you might one day recognise. The air cools slightly as evening deepens, but the sea never truly sleeps. You watch the phosphorescence spark in the waves, tiny plankton glowing green with every crash of surf, like stars spilling into the water. It's hypnotic, a light show beneath the darkness. You lie back on the sand, feeling it cling to your skin, listening to the hiss and crash. The rhythm is timeless, older than even these dinosaurs. As you drift towards sleep, the sounds of the Jurassic Sea wrap around you. The low groan of waves, the calls of distant pterosaurs, the faint splash of something else moving just out of sight. On land, predators stalk. In the forests, giants rumble. But here, at the edge of sea and sky, you find a strange kind of peace, knowing the ocean will keep its secrets for millions of years more. The shoreline fades behind you as you trek inland once more, and soon the land itself begins to change. The soil grows darker, the air sharper, tinged with a metallic bite that stings your nostrils. Ahead, a ridge glows faintly in the twilight, not from the sun but from rivers of cooling rock. You've stepped into one of the volcanic hearts of the Jurassic, a place where the earth doesn't merely breathe, it spits fire. The ground is uneven here, cracked and ridged where molten lava has flowed and hardened into jagged black stone. You step carefully, wary of sharp edges that glisten like broken glass. Steam rises from vents scattered across the field, hissing softly, as if the planet itself is muttering under its breath. You crouch near one, feeling the heat radiate, and a bead of sweat instantly trickles down your forehead. It's like standing too close to an oven door, except this oven stretches for kilometers. Volcanoes in this era are more than dramatic scenery. They are architects of continents. Lava pours from rift zones, adding new land layer by layer, while ash plumes spread nutrients across forests hundreds of kilometers away. You recall that much of Pangaea's breakup was driven by volcanic activity, the earth tearing open and refilling itself with fire. Historians still argue whether these eruptions came in sudden, catastrophic bursts or in long, steady pulses. But either way, the result is the same. Landscapes reshaped, climates stirred, and species tested. You climb a slope of basalt that crunches beneath your weight, reaching a vantage point where the volcanic plain stretches into the distance. In the centre, a cone-shaped mountain glows at its summit, threads of lava spilling down its flanks like veins of liquid light. Occasionally it belches a plume of ash, scattering glowing fragments that fall back like fireworks. You can almost hear the earth sigh afterward, relieved of its pressure. It's beautiful, in the way only something dangerous can be. Near the base of the slope, life is already reclaiming the scorched ground. Pioneer plants, lichens, mosses and hardy ferns cling to cracks in the rock, their roots prying at weaknesses, breaking stone into soil grain by grain. Insects buzz between them, stubborn and opportunistic. It's a reminder that no matter how destructive the eruption, life finds a foothold. You smile at the thought, nature's version of moving into a freshly built apartment, still unfinished but ready for tenants. As you descend, you stumble upon a patch of still cooling lava, the surface crusted over but glowing faintly red beneath. You crouch low, careful not to get too close, and marvel at the patterns, swirls and ridges frozen mid-motion, like taffy stretched and twisted before hardening. Millions of years later, people will call these formations Peho-Eho or AA, depending on whether they flowed smoothly or jaggedly. Here, they're simply the Earth's handwriting, signatures of fire across stone. The air grows thicker as another vent releases a burst of gas. You cough, eyes watering, and wonder how animals survive here. Yet, as if summoned by your curiosity, a group of small dinosaurs scurries across the rocks. They're quick and agile, their feet adapted to gripping the uneven surface. They pause at a steaming pool, lapping cautiously at the warm water before darting off again. For them, the volcano is not a threat, but part of their daily terrain. You envy their casual acceptance. A quirky observation pulls you from your awe. In some places, people thousands of years from now will believe volcanic vents are gateways to the underworld. Standing here, it's not hard to see why. The hissing steam, the glowing cracks, the acrid smell, it feels less like geology and more like some mythological threshold. You half expect a chorus of underworld spirits to rise, though all you hear is the steady bubbling of molten rock beneath your feet. Night falls, and the volcano transforms into a spectacle. The sky above is ink black, sprinkled with stars, while the slopes below burn in streaks of orange and red. Ash particles in the air catch the glow, drifting like embers from a colossal campfire. You lie on a flat boulder, watching the sparks swirl upward, and think about how the Earth is endlessly restless, always reshaping itself, even when no one is watching. The dinosaurs may rule the land, but beneath their feet, the planet is the true monarch. A low rumble shakes the ground, subtle, but enough to make your chest vibrate. Somewhere deep inside the mountain, pressure builds. You wonder if this will end in a dramatic eruption, the kind that blackens skies and poisons seas, or if it will simply continue smouldering, reshaping slowly. Either way, you're aware of your own fragility here. The volcano does not care about your story, it is writing its own. And yet, in the glow of fire against stone, you feel an odd calm. The heat wraps around you like a heavy blanket, the hiss of vents a lullaby, the pulse of the earth a steady heartbeat beneath your body. You close your eyes, knowing that while the land may break, burn and rebuild, it always finds a way forward. Just as you will, one step at a time, through this Jurassic night. Morning light filters across the volcanic slopes you left behind, and with it comes a subtle change in the air. It is alive in a new way, buzzing, flickering, darting, a symphony of wings. You step into a clearing and realize the Jurassic world is not ruled only by giants or hunters, but also by the tiny engineers you've mostly overlooked, the insects. They hum around you in dazzling numbers, some familiar, some utterly alien, their forms weaving through the forest like notes of a restless melody. A dragonfly as long as your forearm zips past, wings shimmering like glass. Its flight is precise, surgical even, as it pivots mid-air to snatch another insect in its mandibles. The buzz that follows is sharp, metallic, almost aggressive. Dragonflies have been around since long before this era, but here they continue their reign as aerial hunters, patrolling ponds and rivers with no respect for personal space. You duck instinctively, half joking that the Jurassic sky needs traffic lights. Nearby, beetles scuttle across the bark of a fallen conifer. Their hard shells gleam like polished armour, each one a miniature tank marching through moss. Some burrow into the wood, leaving tiny holes like secret doorways. Others dart beneath leaves, vanishing into shadows. Their persistence is impressive. Beetles will eventually become one of the most diverse groups of creatures on Earth, and watching them here, you see why. They can eat almost anything, adapt to almost any niche, and reproduce in dizzying numbers. But it's not all armoured beetles and predatory dragonflies. Something more delicate is unfolding too. You notice small primitive flies hovering above cycads, their bodies dusted with yellow grains. At first you assume it's just random debris, but then you realise you're looking at the earliest forms of pollination. These insects are unknowingly ferrying pollen between plants, shaping the future of ecosystems. Flowering plants won't rise until much later, but the groundwork is already being laid in these quiet exchanges. Without them, entire landscapes of the future would never bloom. You pause by a patch of cycads, watching as another insect, a wasp-like creature with translucent wings, lands briefly, brushes against a cone and lifts off again. The action is so small it almost escapes notice. Yet you understand the scale of its impact. The giants may leave footprints deep enough to last millennia, but these tiny flyers leave a legacy that will alter the planet's entire plant life. It's humbling, and slightly annoying when one lands on your arm and refuses to leave. The forest itself seems to hum with this insect empire. Cicada-like calls rise and fall in rhythmic waves, while crickets chirp from the shadows. The sound is so constant that you stop hearing it as noise and start hearing it as texture, like the static on a vinyl record. You wonder if the dinosaurs themselves noticed it, or if it simply faded into the background of their massive lives. For you, though, it's inescapable. Every breath you take carries the faint musk of insect wings and resin dust. A quirky observation bubbles up. In some ancient cultures, millions of years later, people will believe that beetles push the sun across the sky, modelling myths after their tireless rolling of dung balls. Here in the Jurassic, you actually see dung beetles at work near a sauropod dropping, shaping spheres of waste and rolling them away with astonishing determination. You laugh quietly. If this is where myth begins, then it started not in human imagination, but in the relentless industry of bugs. By midday, the heat thickens, and the insect activity grows frenzied. Swarms gather above stagnant pools, rising and falling like clouds made of wings. From a distance, the movement looks almost alive in itself, a shifting organism of hundreds moving in unison. Pterosaurs swoop down occasionally, feasting on the swarm, their wings slicing the air. It's a reminder that insects, for all their influence, are also a buffet for nearly everything larger. Their survival strategy is sheer numbers, overwhelming predators with abundance. You settle in the shade of a ginkgo, fanning yourself with one of its broad leaves, and watch ants parade along the ground. They're smaller than modern ants, simpler in form, but already building small colonies. Already experimenting with cooperation, they scuttle in lines carrying fragments of plants, united in purpose. You imagine what they might become millions of years later. Farmers, warriors, architects. But here they are just beginning, tiny foot soldiers in the vast army of Jurassic insects. As evening comes, the light softens and fireflies begin their slow dance. Their glow is faint compared to the bright flashes you know today, but it's enough to paint specks of gold in the underbrush. The forest feels transformed as though stars have fallen to earth. You sit quietly listening to the hum dim slightly and realize that these insects, buzzing, glowing, crawling, are as vital to this world as any towering sauropod. They are the gears in the machine and the hidden orchestra keeping time while the giants take center stage. And as you close your eyes against the shimmering glow, the lull of their endless buzzing becomes something unexpected, a cradle song, weaving you into the quiet machinery of the Jurassic night. The insect chorus fades into the distance as you move through the ferns, but soon a new sound fills the air, sharp, fluttering beats, punctuated by the startled chirps. You stop, craning your neck upward, and there it is, the flicker of feathers against the Jurassic sky. At first, it looks like a small theropod leaping clumsily between branches, but then you realize you're watching one of the earliest experiments in flight. A feathered dinosaur scrambles up the trunk of a conifer, claws gripping bark with practiced ease. It pauses, lifts its head, and then launches itself into open air, its arms fringed with primitive feathers spread wide. For a heartbeat, gravity wins, but then the creature flaps, awkward but determined, gliding just far enough to land on another tree. You exhale, half laughing. It's not quite a bird, not quite a dinosaur, but something balanced on the tightrope between. Archaeopteryx, you think, though this iconic species won't fully appear until later in the Jurassic. What you're seeing might be one of its precursors, smaller and scrappier. Its feathers are not the sleek aerodynamic tools of modern birds. They're messy, more like a child's homemade kite. Still, the principle is the same: lift, glide, land. Evolution is rehearsing for the grand debut of flight, and you're lucky enough to watch the rehearsal. Feathers here aren't just for flying. Many of these small dinosaurs sport tufts of down along their bodies, useful for warmth in cooler nights. Others display longer, more decorative plumes along their arms or tails, likely for show. You imagine them strutting through the undergrowth, puffing up like prehistoric peacocks, trying to impress mates or intimidate rivals. Historians still argue whether feathers originally evolved for insulation, display, or even as insect swatting tools. Maybe it was all three. You shrug, amused. Sometimes nature doesn't settle on just one answer. Above you, a small flock gathers. They clamber onto branches, chattering softly, before launching themselves almost simultaneously. The air fills with flapping wings and startled cries, a chaotic ballet. Some land gracefully, others tumble into ferns, flustered but unhurt. It's messy, imperfect, but undeniably progress. Watching them, you realise this is how revolutions begin, not with perfection, but with persistence. You pick up a fallen feather from the forest floor. It's small greyish, tipped with a faint iridescence that catches sunlight when you tilt it. It feels oddly familiar, like the pigeons or sparrows that haunt your modern sidewalks. Yet holding it here in this age, it feels like a relic from the future, a whisper of what's to come. The forest itself seems to react to these feathered pioneers. Insects scatter as they swoop down, snatching prey mid-flight. Small mammals skitter nervously at their shadows. Even larger herbivores pause occasionally, tilting heads curiously at the flapping newcomers. It's not dominance yet. These feathered creatures are too small, too fragile, but it's presence. A new kind of presence that will only grow louder through time. A quirky thought makes you grin. Millions of years later, people will argue endlessly over whether birds are really dinosaurs. Standing here, the answer feels embarrassingly obvious. You're watching dinosaurs with feathers, climbing trees, leaping into air. You want to shout across time, "Yes, birds are dinosaurs, case closed." But of course, no one can hear you, except maybe that feathered little creature now staring at you, head cocked, as if it suspects your secret amusement. As dusk approaches, the forest fills with their calls. Some chirp in high, squeaky notes, others hiss or croak. Together, it sounds like a chaotic orchestra warming up, disorganized but alive. You lean against a ginkgo trunk, closing your eyes, letting the flutter of wings and the chatter of calls wash over you. It's a strange lullaby, more frantic than soothing, but you find comfort in the idea that even this noisy rehearsal is part of something monumental. The sky above deepens into purple, and silhouettes dart across the fading light. You imagine what it must have felt like, millions of years ago, for the first creature to truly glide between trees and realize it had escaped the pull of the ground. Did it understand the significance? Probably not. But you do. You know that these awkward leaps are the first verses of a story that will end with swallows, owls, and eagles soaring across your own skies. As night falls, you tuck the small feather behind your ear, a keepsake from this threshold moment. The giants may shake the ground, but it's these little dreamers of the air who steal your thoughts as you drift into sleep, wondering what it feels like to ride the thermals of a Jurassic dawn. The night passes uneventfully, save for the distant calls of predators and the rustling of wings overhead. By dawn, you wake to a different sound, the faint patter of tiny feet scurrying through the undergrowth. At first, you brace for another pack of small theropods, but when you part the fern fronds, you see something far more modest. A creature no bigger than your hand, covered in a fine layer of fur. Its whiskers twitch, nose quivering as it sniffs the air. You smile despite yourself. This is no dinosaur. This is one of the true underdogs of the Jurassic, an early mammal. It freezes when it sees you, black bead eyes wide before bolting into a hollow log. You crouch nearby, peering into the shadows, and spot more of them. A family huddled together in the dark warmth of their burrow. Their fur looks coarse, mottled brown, perfect camouflage against bark and soil. One nibbles at an insect carcass, sharp little teeth flashing. Another chews on seeds, cracking them with delicate precision. They're quick, cautious, never straying far from the safety of cover. In a world where giants dominate, their survival strategy is simple. Stay small, stay hidden, stay quiet. It's humbling to realize that these creatures, so fragile, so overshadowed, are your ancestors' ancestors. Without their persistence, there would be no you, no late-night documentaries, no smartphones, no midnight snacks, just ferns, reptiles, and endless humidity. You almost want to thank them, but that would involve explaining evolutionary biology to a rodent-sized insectivore, and frankly, you doubt it cares. The early mammals of this period aren't much to look at compared to their dinosaur neighbours. Most are shrew-like, some resembling opossums or moles. They scavenge, forage, and hide. Yet, appearances deceive. Their brains, though small, are more complex than most reptiles of the time. They process sounds better, smell better, and exhibit sharper reflexes. It's as though nature, while lavishing grandeur on dinosaurs, quietly invested ingenuity into mammals. The payoff won't come for millions of years, but the foundation is already set. You watch as one ventures out, snatching a beetle from the bark of a tree. Its jaws crunch audibly, a sound oddly satisfying, like biting into a crisp cracker. Another scurries up to lap dew from a ginkgo leaf, whiskers brushing against droplets that glisten in the morning sun. Their movements are jerky, nervous, like every second alive is a gamble. And in truth, it is. Predators lurk everywhere. You remember the Dilophosaurus from days before, and you shudder at the thought of one of these tiny mammals crossing its path. Historians of paleontology still argue over how diverse mammals were during the Jurassic. Some say they were limited to small nocturnal insectivores. Others suggest a surprising variety, including gliders, burrowers, and even early swimmers. Fossil evidence is tantalizing but incomplete. You glance up at the canopy and imagine a furry creature leaping between branches, spreading loose skin flaps to glide like a flying squirrel. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. The debate continues, but your imagination fills the gaps. A quirky fact surfaces. Some Jurassic mammals already experimented with differentiated teeth, incisors, canines, and molars. Unlike the simple pegs of reptiles, these teeth allowed them to tackle a wide range of diets. You chuckle softly. Here you are, staring at the great-grandparents of your dentist's paycheck. In their tiny jaws lies the key to future culinary adventures, from chewing popcorn to gnawing steak. The day warms quickly and you follow the scurrying mammals to a cluster of burrows near a stream. Their entrances are small, lined with bits of moss and leaves. You imagine the warmth inside, the tiny bodies curled together, conserving heat and safety. A few juveniles peek out, squeaking softly before retreating. Their voices are high-pitched, almost musical, blending into the chorus of insects. You realise that most of the Jurassic soundscape is made by creatures you can barely see. The giants may rumble, but the world hums with whispers. Predators don't ignore these whispers. From your vantage point, you notice a small theropod stalking the burrow cluster, eyes fixed, body crouched. It darts suddenly, but the mammals scatter in an explosion of squeaks and fur. Most vanish underground, but one is caught, wriggling in the predator's jaws. You turn away, unwilling to watch the end. Survival here is unforgiving, and these underdogs endure not because they always escape, but because enough of them do. As the sun sinks, you linger near the burrows, feeling oddly protective of their tiny occupants. You know their story continues far beyond this moment, far beyond this age. They will outlast the giants, outlast the hunters, outlast even the forests. And one day their descendants will light fires, paint caves, and eventually build cities. But tonight they are just small, nervous creatures hiding in shadows, unaware of the destiny coiled in their fragile frames. You close your eyes to their faint squeaks, a lullaby of persistence, and you feel strangely reassured. If such tiny lives can endure in a world of giants, maybe anything is possible. The following morning greets you with a softer light, as though the sun itself is hesitant to intrude. You follow the slope of the land until the trees thin, and the air takes on a new smell, briny, sharp, layered with the sweetness of algae. Before long, you hear the rhythmic hush of waves rolling against sand, punctuated by deeper splashes. You've reached a Jurassic coastline alive with creatures that seem halfway between the familiar and the fantastic. The beach is broad, littered with driftwood and scattered shells, some spiral-shaped ammonites washed ashore from the last tide. Their shells gleam faintly in the morning light, and you pocket one out of habit, even though you know that it belongs to this place, not your shelf at home. As you walk along the damp sand, you notice tracks crisscrossing the surface. Three-toed dinosaur prints, tiny mammal trails, and the unmistakable drag marks of something heavier crawling from the sea. And then you see them. A group of long-snouted reptiles basking on the beach, their bodies stretched lazily across the sand. They resemble crocodiles but leaner, with legs slightly longer, adapted for both land and water. Their jaws gape open as they soak in the heat, revealing rows of sharp conical teeth perfect for snagging fish. You recognize them as early relatives of modern crocodiles, though these Jurassic versions are more agile, less bound to swamps. Watching them lie in the sun, you wonder how little has changed in their lineage. They were here long before the dinosaurs, and they'll be here long after. The waves surge, and a shadow rises from the surf. At first you think it's driftwood, but then the shape moves with purpose. A massive turtle-like creature lumbers onto the sand. Its shell is broad, ridged, not quite like the domes of modern turtles, but clearly protective. With slow determination, it digs into the damp sand, scooping out a hollow with its hind limbs. You crouch low, watching as it begins to lay eggs, round and leathery, rolling gently into the pit. There's a quiet rhythm to the act, and you feel honoured to witness it. A quirky detail comes to mind. Some early marine reptiles may have returned to land only for egg-laying, just as modern turtles do. Others perhaps gave live birth in the water, avoiding land altogether. Historians still argue about which strategy came first, the fossil record offering tantalising clues, but never a complete picture. Watching this turtle-like ancestor, you realise nature often experiments with multiple solutions, keeping whichever works best. The beach hums with other activity too. Wading birds don't exist yet, but small feathered dinosaurs prowl the tide pools, snapping up crabs and insects. Their reflections ripple in the shallow water as they dart and peck, balancing on nimble legs. Every so often one lets out a sharp chirp, a sound so modern that it startles you. For a moment you feel like you've stumbled onto a seaside scene not so far removed from your own time. You pause near a tide pool to study its miniature world. Sea stars cling to rocks, there are arms curling lazily in the current. Primitive fish flicker beneath the surface, quick flashes of silver. A horseshoe crab trudges slowly across the sand, dragging its tail spine like a forgotten rake. You laugh softly. This survivor will outlive almost everything here, a quiet reminder that sometimes the simplest designs endure the longest. Overhead, pterosaurs wheel and dive, skimming the waves for fish. Their cries echo like gulls, sharp and metallic, completing the seaside illusion. One swoops close to you, its wingspan nearly brushing the ground. Its long beak snaps shut on a wriggling fish, and with a triumphant screech it climbs back into the air. You duck instinctively, then laugh at yourself. Clearly you're not on its menu. Still, being near creatures that fly with such ease makes you feel a little clumsy, tethered awkwardly to the ground. As the sun climbs higher, the reptiles on the sand grow restless. The crocodile-like creatures slip back into the water with surprising speed, tails thrashing in graceful arcs. The turtle ancestor, finished with its nest, covers the eggs with sand before lumbering back into the waves. Watching it disappear, you feel a pang of vulnerability for the clutch left behind. You know that many will never hatch, lost to predators or storms, but the persistence of the ritual is what ensures survival over time. A quirky thought tickles you. Someday human children will build sandcastles on beaches like this, unaware that the very act of digging mimics the ancient nesting patterns of reptiles. You grin, imagining a line from turtle to toddler, both shaping sand with the same unspoken purpose to leave a mark, however temporary. Evening paints the sea in shades of orange and violet. The air cools and the tide creeps upward. Reclaiming the shells and footprints scattered across the sand, you sit on a driftwood log watching pterosaurs disappear into the darkening ski, listening to the waves hiss and retreat, hiss and retreat. The smell of salt, the sound of water, the sight of stars emerging overhead, it feels timeless, as if the sea itself has barely changed in 200 million years. And as you close your eyes, lulled by the rhythm of the surf, you realise the coastline is more than a border between land and water. It is a stage, a nursery, a dining hall, a battlefield. Here in the Jurassic, the edge of the sea is where stories begin and end with every rising tide. You rise with the tide the next morning, the sand cool beneath your feet, the salty wind tugging at your hair. As you walk along the coastline, the water glimmers oddly, brighter than yesterday, like a secret waiting to be uncovered. When you wade ankle deep into the shallows, you realise why. Beneath the surface, whole neighbourhoods of coral stretch outward, glowing faintly in the filtered sun. You've stumbled into one of the earliest reef systems of the Jurassic, a bustling underwater city built brick by living brick. You crouch low, peering into the clear water. The corals themselves are small organisms, each no larger than the head of a pin, but together they've constructed sprawling fortresses of limestone. The structures rise like miniature castles, their towers and walls crawling with colour. Bright sponges cling to the surfaces, their pores filtering water. Feather-armed crinoids wave gently in the current, resembling underwater flowers that open and close with each passing flow. You run your hand across a coral ridge, feeling the sharp edges, and realise that you're touching not just stone but millions of lives locked together. Fish dart in and out of the coral crevices, slender silver streaks quick as thought. Some flash iridescent greens and blues, catching sunlight like jewels. They're smaller than the sleek predators offshore, but their numbers are staggering, a swarm that seems to move as one. You sit on the wet sand and simply watch, mesmerised by how they turn together as though some invisible conductor is guiding them. Ammonites drift lazily above the reefs, their coiled shells casting faint shadows. Some species hover close to the corals, using the structures as shelter, while others spiral upward into open water. Their delicate tentacles reach and grasp, searching for morsels. One catches a small fish, and you can't help but think of them as floating traps, silent but efficient. Later, their fossils will be found embedded in limestone, beautiful spirals sold as jewellery or mistaken for sacred symbols. For now, they are simply another thread in the reef's living tapestry. A quirky detail catches your attention. Tiny shrimp-like creatures scuttle among the coral branches, constantly cleaning them. This symbiosis, this trade of shelter for hygiene, has likely been going on for millions of years already. It makes you smile, an ancient housekeeping service, long before anyone thought to hire one. Without them, the reefs might suffocate under algae. With them, the structures thrive, growing taller and stronger with each passing generation. Above the waterline, the reef's influence spreads further. Seabirds don't yet exist, but pterosaurs swoop low, plucking fish from schools that stray too near the surface. Their calls mingle with the hiss of waves, creating a soundtrack of hunger and survival. You notice that the abundance of fish attracts other hunters too. Sleek marine reptiles circling just beyond the breakers. Every bite of coral, every flutter of shrimp cascades upward into this intricate web of life. You paddle a little deeper, careful not to disturb the fragile structures. The light bends and fractures, painting everything in wavering blues. For a moment you forget the towering dinosaurs inland, the volcanoes roaring behind mountains. Here, under the water, the world feels quieter, almost gentle, but you know the gentleness is an illusion. Predators lurk in every shadow, and storms can strip reefs bare in hours. Survival here is as precarious as anywhere else. Historians still argue how extensive Jurassic reefs were compared to modern ones. Some claim they stretched for hundreds of kilometres, rivals of the Great Barrier Reef. Others suggest patchier growth, limited by fluctuating sea levels. The fossil record offers glimpses, reef fragments frozen in stone, fish teeth scattered in ancient limestone, but no complete map. You gaze across the shimmering shallows and imagine both possibilities. Entire coasts glowing with coral light or scattered pockets of brilliance like stars across a dark sky. The sun dips lower, and the reef changes with it. Colours sharpen, shadows deepen. Fish dart more nervously, sensing the approach of larger hunters. In the fading light, the corals themselves seem to glow faintly, as if absorbing the last warmth of the day. You stay until twilight, when the water begins to shimmer with bioluminescence. Tiny plankton spark with each wave, turning the reef into a galaxy beneath your feet. You sit back on the sand, stunned into silence, watching the stars above echo the stars below. A quirky thought makes you chuckle. In your own time, humans will spend fortunes travelling to tropical reefs, strapping on sail and snorkels, snapping photos, posting them online. But here you are, in the Jurassic, the only tourist in existence, staring at the reefs no camera will ever capture again. The absurdity of it is almost comforting. The tide creeps higher, and you know the reef will keep glowing long after you fall asleep. It's a city that never rests, its builders working silently, tirelessly, unnoticed. You lie back, the sand cool against your skin, listening to the soft lap of waves over coral, the faint crackle of shrimp in the shallows, and the distant cries of pterosaurs returning to roost. The reef hums on, eternal in its slow construction, while the night wraps around you like a tide, pulling you gently towards sleep. The reef's glow still lingers in your mind when you wake, but the world above has turned restless again. Clouds pile on the horizon, thick and towering, their bellies bruised purple and grey. The air is heavy, pressing against your skin as though the atmosphere itself has decided to sit on your chest. You take a step inland, and the silence is uncanny. Birds are not here yet, but even the chirps of small feathered dinosaurs have quieted, the insects subdued. Nature seems to know what's coming. The first wind hits you with a sudden slap, carrying the smell of wet earth and resin. The treetops sway, hissing like a million whispering voices. Leaves tear loose and spiral through the air. You shield your face just as the first drops of rain splatter down, fat and cold. They sting on contact, the way sudden summer storms sometimes do in your world. But here, the storm is no passing shower. It is a monsoon. Rain sheets across the landscape in relentless torrents, blurring the line between sky and ground. Within minutes, the soil beneath your feet turns to slurry. Small streams overflow, merging into rushing rivers that claw at the land. You stagger to higher ground, soaked through, hair plastered against your forehead. Each raindrop seems heavier than in modern storms, as though the thicker atmosphere of the Jurassic amplifies their weight. Thunder cracks overhead, so loud it rattles your ribs. A bolt of lightning splits the sky, striking a conifer in the distance. The tree explodes in sparks and smoke, collapsing in a spray of embers. For a moment, the rain and fire clash, sizzling against one another, before the storm drowns the flames. You marvel at how fragile even the tallest trees seem under such force. And yet the forest is not destroyed by these tempests. It is sculpted. Rivers cut the deeper channels, carrying nutrients downstream. Floodplains deposit new soils when waters recede. Whole ecosystems depend on these cycles of destruction and renewal. You imagine the sauropods trudging through these floods, their immense size giving them the advantage of height. Smaller dinosaurs, though, must scramble for higher ground, huddling under dripping foliage, shivering in the deluge. Historians still argue about how regular these monsoon patterns were. Some evidence suggests the early Jurassic had long wet and dry seasons, dictated by Pangaea's still-forming geography. Others propose shorter, more chaotic bursts. Either way, you're experiencing firsthand the intensity of a storm that doesn't just water the land, but reshapes it entirely. The rain doesn't ease, it thickens. Sheets of water cascade so heavily that you can barely see 5 meters ahead. You huddle beneath the wide fronds of a cycad, though they offer little protection. The ground trembles as something massive moves nearby. Through the downpour, you glimpse the silhouette of a sauropod herd. Their long necks sway above the treetops while their feet slog noisily through mud. Calves stick close to their mothers, nearly swept off balance by the rushing water. The sight is both majestic and heartbreaking, a reminder that even giants struggle in the grip of nature. Then comes the landslide. A distant roar builds into a terrifying crash as a hillside collapses under the weight of water. Mud, boulders, and uprooted trees tumble in a violent cascade, filling the valley below. You cling to your cycad shelter, heart pounding. The force is unstoppable, erasing everything in its path. And yet, you know from the future that such slides leave behind fertile ground, paving the way for fresh growth. Even destruction is just another form of preparation. By late afternoon, the storm finally begins to ease. The rain slows to a steady drizzle, and the clouds lift slightly, revealing pale shafts of sunlight. The forest is unrecognizable. Pools of water glimmer everywhere. Trees lie broken, and the air smells of wet ash and churned soil. Frogs croak tentatively from the new ponds, reclaiming the soundscape. Insects resume their buzzing, eager to take advantage of the fresh detritus. The cycle has turned again, from silence to chaos to renewal. A quirky thought crosses your mind. If you had Wi-Fi here, the weather app would probably just shrug and say, "Good luck." The unpredictability of these storms defies neat hourly forecasts, yet, to the Jurassic world, there is nothing unpredictable about it. The creatures here are built for this rhythm. The forests bend, the rivers swell, and life adapts. You step carefully through the sodden ground, mud sucking at your ankles. In one shallow pool, you spot something astonishing: dinosaur tracks, freshly preserved in clay. 3-toed prints, sharp and distinct, march away into the distance. You crouch to touch them, knowing that if the mud hardens under the sun, these impressions could last millions of years. One day, someone in your time might stumble upon them, marveling at the moment you just lived. The sky clears further, and the sunset is spectacular. Clouds blaze orange and crimson, their edges still dripping rain. The wet earth reflects the colours, doubling the brilliance. You sit on a fallen log, soaked but oddly content, listening to the distant calls of dinosaurs re-emerging after the storm. The air is cooler now, washed clean, almost sweet. And as night falls, the memory of thunder still echoing faintly in your bones, you understand that storms here are more than weather. They are storytellers, erasing, rewriting, and renewing the script of life again and again. You curl into yourself beneath the still dripping fronds, lulled by the soft patter of lingering rain, and drift into sleep with the taste of ozone still sharp on your tongue. The storm has passed, leaving the world rinsed and gleaming, but with darkness comes a new kind of life. You lie awake on damp ferns, listening. At first, it's only silence, a heavy pause after the rain. Then slowly, cautiously, the night begins to sing. The Jurassic has no human cities, no distant traffic, no neon glow, only a vast wilderness where sound is the primary language of survival. It begins with insects. Crickets trill in overlapping patterns, their chirps weaving into a steady rhythm. Cicadas add longer, droning notes, like violins holding a single string. Somewhere closer to the water, frogs croak in throaty bursts, responding to one another as if in conversation. Together, these voices create a layered hum that fills the air, more symphony than chaos if you let yourself sink into it. You exhale, the tension in your shoulders dissolving. This is white noise at its most ancient, a lullaby older than humanity itself. But insects and frogs are only the opening act. From the trees comes a flutter of wings and a high, keening cry, primitive feathered dinosaurs stirring under the moonlight. Some chirp softly, tentative, like birds testing the air at dawn. Others shriek in the short bursts, startlingly sharp, echoes bouncing through the canopy. Their voices are rough drafts of the songs you'll one day hear from sparrows, finches, and owls. It's strange to realize you're listening to the earliest rehearsals of birdsong, messy but earnest, carried on the chill, humid night air. You tilt your head back and stare upward. The sky is impossibly clear after the storm, every star sharpened by washed air. The Milky Way spills across the darkness, mirrored faintly by the glow of damp leaves. But then something interrupts your stargazing. The leathery shadow of a pterosaur gliding silently overhead. Its wings whisper against the air, barely audible, before it lets out a sharp bark. Others respond in the distance, their calls eerily similar to modern seabirds. They vanish into the dark, leaving you with goosebumps. The deeper into night you sink, the stranger the sounds become. A distant rumble vibrates through the ground. Not thunder this time, but the low, resonant call of a sauropod. It's not a roar or bellow, more like a drawn-out bass note almost below the range of your hearing. You feel it in your chest, a subsonic heartbeat that pulses through the forest. The herd must be on the move even at night, their communication carrying across kilometres. You can't help but compare it to whales in your own world, using deep calls to bridge vast distances. Closer by, a rustle in the undergrowth sharpens your attention. You freeze, ears straining. Then comes a series of clicks and chirps, surprisingly complex. Small theropods, perhaps hunting in the dark, using vocalizations to coordinate. You can't see them, but you can feel their presence in every shifting leaf, every pause between chirps. The sound is unsettling, but also fascinating. Pack communication evolving in real time. Historians still argue whether these dinosaurs had the vocal sophistication of modern birds or something cruder. Judging by what you're hearing, you suspect they were more talkative than given credit for. A quirky sound makes you laugh under your breath, a shrill, squeaky call almost comical in its pitch. You glance around, trying to spot the source, and eventually see a small mammal poking its head from a burrow. Its squeaks continue, high and insistent, until another head appears beside it. You realize you're eavesdropping on a family reunion, and the absurdity of it lightens the tension of the night. Even in a world of predators, there's room for squeaky domestic life. The forest floor itself seems to hum. You realize it's not your imagination. Countless insects are vibrating wings, legs, or abdomens in unison, turning the very soil into a resonating drum. It's hypnotic. You lie back on the damp ground, feeling the vibrations through your spine, letting them lull you. The sound is steady, ancient, and strangely comforting. And then, silence. Absolute suffocating maintenance. Every creature halts at once, the night music cut mid-note. You hold your breath, heart pounding. Something moves in the darkness, heavy steps, deliberate, crushing twigs. The silence stretches until your ears ring, broken only by the faint hiss of your own breath. Finally, the steps recede, fading into the distance, and the night cautiously resumes. You exhale in relief, realizing you've just survived by doing nothing but lying still. When the danger passes, the symphony resumes with renewed vigor, as though every creature is making up for lost time. Crickets chirp louder, Frogs croak more boldly, feathered dinosaurs cry out with abandon. The lullaby becomes a triumphant chorus, reminding you that life here is resilient, endlessly loud, endlessly alive. You curl into your fern bed, eyelids heavy. The sounds don't fade, they surround you, blanket you, pull you under like warm water. You drift towards sleep listening to the Jurassic night perform its ancient music, a reminder that long before humanity, the world already knew how to sing. Morning arrives not with birdsong, at least not the kind you know, but with the low, resonant rumble of giants. You sit up from your damp fern bed to see dust rising on the horizon, the haze trembling with the movement. The sound is different from the herds you've already encountered. It's not just the slow thunder of footsteps, it's punctuated by sharp cracks like wood snapping in a fire. You rise to your feet, curiosity prickling, and walk toward the noise. On the plain ahead, two sauropods face each other, necks arched high like dueling cranes. Their bodies are massive, but it's the necks that draw your attention, swaying back and forth in deliberate rhythm. Then, with sudden force, they slam them together. The crack reverberates across the valley, a shockwave you feel in your chest. You flinch, instinctively stepping back. This is no gentle display. This is a clash of titans. The sauropods circle one another, tails whipping in agitation. They lift their forequarters slightly, necks swinging like enormous battering rams. Each impact sends tremors through the ground. Dust swirls, mingling with the musky smell of sweat and crushed vegetation. Smaller dinosaurs scatter from the edges of the clearing, unwilling to risk being collateral damage. You can hardly blame them. Standing here, you feel like someone who accidentally wandered onto a demolition site. Historians still argue whether sauropods really fought with their necks. Some suggest the vertebrae were too fragile, better suited for reaching leaves than delivering blows. Others argue the anatomy, with its massive muscles and reinforced structures, was built for exactly this kind of combat. Watching these two, you lean toward the latter. Their strikes aren't haphazard. They're calculated, powerful, honed by millions of years of survival. One rears higher, delivering a downward arc that smashes into its rival's flank. The sound is sickening, like stone against stone. The struck sauropod bellows, a deep, resonant roar that makes your knees weak. It retaliates immediately, swinging its neck in a wide arc, forcing the other to stumble. The ground shakes as one of them nearly loses balance, crashing down with enough force to rattle loose pebbles from nearby cliffs. You duck behind a cluster of cycads, trying to stay out of sight. Your heart hammers, not just from fear but from awe. This is a duel you would never believe if you weren't seeing it with your own eyes. These giants are not mindless eaters of leaves. They are individuals, competing for dominance, for territory, perhaps for mates. Their battles echo the conflicts of rams, stags, and elephants in your own time. Different scale, same story. A quirky detail catches your attention. Smaller dinosaurs don't just flee, they watch. A group of feathered theropods lingers at the edge of the plain, eyes glinting. They chirp excitedly with each blow, as though spectators at a gladiator match. Perhaps they're opportunists, waiting to scavenge scraps from the loser. Or maybe they're simply fascinated the way crows in your world watch large animals fight. Either way, their presence adds an eerie layer of audience participation. The battle continues for what feels like hours, but is likely only minutes. Finally, one sauropod falters, lowering its neck in submission. The other lifts its head high, trumpeting triumph. The sound is so loud it vibrates the very air, scattering birds, or rather, their feathered dinosaur precursors, from the treetops. The victor stomps forward, claiming the center of the plain while the defeated slowly withdraws, each step heavy with exhaustion. Silence follows, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the buzzing of opportunistic insects. You step cautiously from your hiding place, your legs trembling. The ground is littered with deep impressions where their feet pounded, and patches of earth are torn up where tails whipped the soil. You kneel to press your hand into one footprint, barely spanning the depth of its curve. It feels like touching history in its rawest form. The victorious sauropod resumes feeding as though nothing happened, stripping branches from tall conifers, ignoring the chaos it just wrought. Life goes on. For the smaller creatures of the plain, the battle was just another day's event, a spectacle followed by routine. For you, it was a reminder that even giants must fight for their place in the world. As the sun dips low, the air cools, and you retreat toward the forest edge. You glance back one last time at the massive silhouette still grazing, neck swaying calmly in the fading light. The power of that clash hums in your bones, impossible to forget. And as night descends, you realise the truth. The Jurassic is not only a world of survival, but of dominance, rivalry and pride. Even the largest creatures alive must prove themselves, slamming their necks together under a sky that barely notices. You curl up beneath the shelter of cycads, lulled by the memory of their thunderous blows, and drift into uneasy dreams where the ground shakes beneath dueling shadows. The echoes of the sauropod clash still linger in your bones as you wake. But today the landscape hums with a different kind of motion. The air is alive with dust and low rumbles, not from battle, but from the steady tramp of thousands of feet. You crest a hill of fern-carpeted earth and stare down at a sight so vast it almost defies comprehension. An endless migration of dinosaurs stretching from horizon to horizon. The herd is made up of herbivores of all shapes and sizes. Smaller, beaked dinosaurs scurry in the vanguard, nibbling at tender shoots as they move. Behind them, medium-sized stegosaurs plod in rows, their plated backs gleaming like armoured ridges. But the heart of the herd, the rhythm that drives the earth itself, is the sauropods. Their necks sway like ships' masts above the sea of ferns, their bodies casting shadows that roll across the ground like moving hills. You descend cautiously, the ground trembling under each step of the herd. Dust rises in clouds, catching the sunlight until it looks like the entire plain is wrapped in golden haze. The smell is pungent: sweat, dung, crushed plants, and the sharp tang of disturbed soil. You gag slightly but press on, aware that this is not merely movement, it is survival. These creatures are chasing seasonal rains, following the green flush of vegetation that bursts after storms. Historians still argue whether dinosaur migrations mirrored those of modern wildebeests, precise and predictable, or if they were more chaotic, driven by sudden scarcity. Watching the steady order of the herd, you suspect a little of both. The sauropods march with purpose, yet smaller groups weave in and out, foraging opportunistically. The pattern is fluid, a living river of flesh and bone. You spot juveniles trotting close to their mothers, legs pumping quickly to keep up with strides 10 times their size. Some stumble in the churned mud, only to be nudged upright by gentle nudges of massive tails. There is tenderness here, hidden within the thunder. The sight softens the raw power, reminding you that survival is not only about strength, but about cohesion. Predators lurk, of course. On a ridge to your left, a cluster of theropods watches with sharp intensity. They don't attack outright, instead they shadow the herd, waiting for weakness. The migration is both opportunity and danger, a buffet of potential meals, but also a gauntlet of trampling feet and defensive tails. You imagine the strategy it takes, picking off stragglers, avoiding retaliation. You shiver, thinking of the nights when the herd rests and the predators circle closer, eyes glinting in the dark. A quirky thought crosses your mind. The herd reminds you of a traffic jam, each creature moving in slow, steady progression, the line stretching endlessly. Somewhere in the Jurassic, you wonder if there's a sauropod equivalent of a driver honking impatiently at the dinosaur ahead. The absurdity makes you chuckle, even as the ground trembles beneath you. The migration transforms the land as it passes. Ferns are stripped to stalks, trees are debaked, soil churned into thick mud. Streams overflow with bodies wading across, their currents redirected by sheer numbers. You wade alongside for a while, your feet sinking into the slurry, the water splashing against your knees. A juvenile stegosaurus pauses to drink, eyeing you warily before trundling after its kin. The intimacy of the moment makes your chest ache, this massive creature noticing you, if only for a heartbeat. As the day drags on, the heat builds. Dust and humidity cling to your skin, coating your throat. The herd does not stop. They march under the relentless sun, driven by instinct older than memory. You marvel at the stamina, at the sheer willpower encoded in their bones. Migration is not a choice, it is a compulsion, a contract with survival written into their very blood. Toward evening, the herd begins to settle in a wide floodplain, a temporary resting ground. The sauropods kneel awkwardly, legs folding as they lower their bulk. Smaller dinosaurs fan out to forage, chirping as they tear into low plants. The air buzzes with a strange calm, the kind that comes after relentless motion. Yet even here, sentries remain. A line of stegosaurs stands at the edge of the clearing, tails twitching like spiked maces, daring predators to try their luck. You sit at the edge of the herd, watching the light fade into orange. Dust glows in the sunset, turning the entire migration into a moving silhouette of shadows and fire. The sound is still immense, breathing, stomping, rumbling, but it has shifted from urgency to rhythm like a lullaby in bass notes. You lean back into the ferns, eyelids heavy, letting the herd's steady pulse wash over you. As you drift into sleep, one thought lingers. This is not just a march, it is an ancient ritual repeated across eons, proof that survival is not a solitary endeavour, but a collective journey. And you, small and fragile, are one more body swept along in the great migration of life. The floodplain glistens with dew when you stir awake, but the stillness is deceptive. All around you, life begins again in fragile, hidden ways. You wander from the resting herd and soon notice shallow mounds scattered in the soil. At first, you mistake them for random hills of earth left behind by rain. Then you kneel, brush away damp sand, and reveal what they truly are: nests. The clutch inside is remarkable. Eggs the size of melons, their leathery shells dimpled and pale. They rest half buried in warm soil, the heat of the day and the memory of the storm working together to incubate them. You reach out and hover your hand just above one, feeling faint warmth radiate from the surface. You resist the urge to touch. These are not yours to disturb. They are the fragile future of creatures whose footsteps shake the ground. A faint movement catches your eye. One of the eggs trembles, a soft crack zigzagging across its surface. You hold your breath, leaning closer as a tiny snout pushes through. The hatchling emerges slowly, sticky and awkward, squeaking faintly as it blinks at the blinding daylight. Its body is absurdly small compared to the giants you've seen. No bigger than a chicken. Its eyes, though, carry the same ancient intelligence, the same persistence. Within hours, it will already be running, hiding, trying to survive. For now, it simply collapses against its shell, exhausted from the monumental effort of being born. Around the clearing, more nests crack open in chorus. Tiny calls rise into the morning, a cacophony of squeaks and chirps. Some hatchlings wobble bravely into the open, while others remain curled within their shells. Biding their time, the air smells faintly of damp eggshell and warm earth, oddly comforting. You watch as parents, massive towering creatures, loom nearby, their heads swaying gently as they guard their young. They do not coddle in the way mammals do, but their presence is protective enough. Predators think twice before approaching a nursery of giants. Still, not every egg survives. You notice several shells crushed or missing entirely, likely taken in the night by opportunists, theropods, mammals, even scavenging insects. Survival here is a numbers game. Lay enough eggs, and at least a few will make it to adulthood. You feel a pang of sadness for the lost ones, but the chorus of life around you reminds you that hope outweighs loss. Historians still argue whether dinosaurs nested in communal colonies, returning year after year to the same sites, or whether nesting was scattered and solitary. Standing here, you see rows of mounds stretching into the distance, suggesting that at least some species did gather together, finding strength in numbers. The floodplain feels like a prehistoric maternity ward, noisy, vulnerable, and vital. A quirky detail draws your attention. In one corner of the clearing, a smaller species has tucked its nest under the shade of a fallen log. You watch as its hatchlings emerge in a flurry of squeaks, then scramble immediately into the hollow wood for shelter. Unlike the towering sauropods, these little creatures rely not on size but on secrecy. Already they seem wise to the danger of open ground. You can't help but grin. Clever little rebels, writing their own rules in the great Jurassic playbook. As the sun climbs higher, predators begin to circle. A pair of feathered theropods approaches cautiously, eyes fixed on the smallest nests at the edge. Their bodies sway low to the ground, tails balancing as they creep closer. The hatchlings squeak louder, instinctively sensing danger. Before the hunters can strike, a defensive adult steps forward, its tail lashes with terrifying force, whipping through the air. The predators scatter instantly, chirping in frustration, unwilling to test their luck against a creature 10 times their size. You exhale in relief, heart racing, though you know such encounters will happen again and again. You wander among the nests for hours, enchanted by the rhythm of new life. Hatchlings stumble through ferns, tripping over roots, calling for mothers they may never see. Some gather in small groups, chirping together as if strength could be found in chorus. Others vanish into undergrowth, already beginning their solitary journeys. You realize that the Jurassic is not just about massive predators and towering plants. It is about these fragile, trembling beginnings. Every giant once started here, blind and squeaking in the dirt. By evening, the floodplain glows gold with the setting sun. You sit cross-legged beside one nest, watching as the last hatchling of the day breaks free. Its tiny body shivers in the cooling air, its eyes blinking open for the very first time. You feel strangely protective, though you know its fate is beyond your control. Perhaps it will grow to stride across plains, its footsteps shaking the earth. Perhaps it will vanish by dawn, a meal for something swifter. Either way, its existence is no less miraculous. You lie back, listening to the chorus of hatchlings settling into their new world, and let the thought comfort you. Even in a land ruled by giants, life begins small, fragile, and full of possibility. The floodplain quiets after the flurry of hatching. The air grows cooler, and the horizon stretches in calm shades of lavender and rose. Yet beneath the soil and stone around you, the story of this world is already being written in a different language, the language of fossils. You crouch by a rocky outcrop where rain has worn away layers of mudstone, and you spot something, a faint spiral pressed into the rock, the ghost of an ammonite shell. You run your fingers along the grooves, chilled by the idea that this little swirl has waited 200 million years for you to notice it. Everywhere you look, the earth seems to whisper. Fallen trees, once scorched by volcanic fire, are now petrified, their wood turned to stone so slowly that the grain is still visible. Pebbles glitter with flecks of mineralized bone, once part of living creatures, now eternal fragments of the planet's memory. You imagine a future when humans will stumble across these remnants, chiseling them out of cliffs, mistaking them at first for the bones of dragons, and in a sense they aren't wrong. Historians still argue about when exactly humans first found and mythologized fossils. Some claim that ancient Greeks used them as proof of long-lost monsters. Others point to Chinese records where dinosaur bones were ground into dragon bones for medicine. Standing here in the Jurassic, the connection feels obvious. The bones around you are immense, alien, yet familiar enough to spark myths of creatures too large for human imagination. You smile at the thought that the world's first dragons were simply echoes of these dinosaurs slumbering beneath the soil. You wander further and find a half-buried footprint preserved in hardened mud. 3 toes, sharp claws pressed deep as if the creature had paused to listen before moving on. You place your hand inside the print and feel utterly dwarfed, your palm swallowed by a shadow of movement millions of years old. The print feels alive, like a message scratched into time itself. I was here. Nearby, you uncover another fossilized treasure. This one stranger. A cluster of small bones arranged in a circle, jaws still slightly open, teeth bared. Perhaps a predator caught mid-meal when floodwaters buried it in silt. Perhaps just a carcass carried downstream. The ambiguity unsettles you. Fossils preserve the shapes, but not the stories. Each piece is a riddle, and you realize how much of prehistory is guesswork stitched together from incomplete puzzles. A quirky discovery makes you laugh despite the eeriness. Embedded in stone, you find what looks like the outline of a fern frond, each leaflet etched with delicate precision. It's a fossil plant, immortalized in rock as clearly as if pressed yesterday. The absurdity of it strikes you. Dinosaurs thundered across the land, storms reshaped continents, volcanoes belched fire, and yet here is a fern, fragile and perfect, surviving in stone longer than any roar. Sometimes the quiet things leave the loudest echoes. The sun dips lower, and shadows creep across the plain. You imagine the passage of time speeding forward. The eggs you saw earlier long gone. Their hatchlings either grown or devoured. The sauropod herd reduced to scattered skeletons, storms and floods burying bones under layers of silt. You see those layers hardening, shifting, rising, as mountains millions of years later. You imagine paleontologists with chisels and brushes leaning close, uncovering fragments you walked past only hours ago. The thought humbles you. To them, the fossils will be relics of unimaginable creatures. To you, their neighbours, alive and breathing. You almost wish you could leave a message etched into stone. I saw them. They were real. They were magnificent. But of course, the earth erases almost everything except bones and shadows. Your words would vanish, lost in the churn of soil and time. Night creeps in, and you sit on a rockier ledge, staring at the fossil fern in your hands. The stars prick the sky, and you realize they too are fossils of a sort. Light from ages past, preserved in the vast darkness until it reaches your eyes. Time feels heavy, layered, infinite. You are one small witness in a chain that stretches backward and forward beyond comprehension. As you curl into yourself against the cooling stone, you smile faintly at the thought of those ancient myths, dragons, giants, beasts of fire. They were wrong in detail, but right in essence. The earth really was once filled with monsters too grand to imagine, their stories written in bones beneath your feet. Dawn arrives in muted shades, a softer light than usual, as though the world itself knows a chapter is drawing to a close. You stretch on the rocky ledge, the fossil fern still clutched in your hand, and take in the silence before the day's noises begin. The air feels different, still warm, still heavy with humidity, but there's a subtle shift, a sense that the Jurassic itself is leaning forward, preparing to hand the stage to something new. You walk across the plain where last night you studied bones pressed into stone. Today the ground feels alive, humming with the weight of millions of years pressing ahead. Every step crunches over plants that will one day become coal, over sediments that will one day harden into cliffs. It's dizzying to realise that the very earth under your feet is already rehearsing for the next act, the Cretaceous. But before it yields, the Jurassic has one last display. You crest a hill and see a panorama that steals your breath. Herds of sauropods stretch across the horizon, their necks swaying like a forest in motion. Packs of theropods dart along their edges, sharp and purposeful. Above, pterosaurs wheel in great arcs, their wings cutting against a sky painted gold with dawn. And in the middle of it all, the forests themselves rise like green cathedrals, cycads and conifers swaying under the weight of time. It is not a quiet fading, it is a finale, thunderous and alive. Historians still argue exactly when the Jurassic surrendered to the Cretaceous. Some point to volcanic upheavals, others to subtle shifts in sea levels, still others to evolutionary turnovers that introduce new species. The debate continues because transitions in Earth's history are rarely clean breaks. Standing here, you see that truth embodied. Life does not stop at the edge of a calendar. It flows, changes, blurs. The end of the Jurassic is not an ending at all, but a current slipping quietly into a new river. You pause to watch a moment of tenderness. A juvenile sauropod struggles up a slope, its legs sinking into soft mud. Its mother lowers her massive neck, nudging it gently forward until it reaches stable ground. For a creature so immense, the gesture is surprisingly delicate. You feel something twist in your chest, a reminder that even in the vast churn of epochs, life's details matter. Struggles, nudges, small survivals. These are the quiet threads woven into the loud tapestry of time. As the day warms, the air fills with calls, the high-pitched chatter of feathered dinosaurs, the deep rumble of sauropods, the shrieks of pterosaurs overhead. Together, it sounds like a chorus, each voice contributing to the last great hymn of the Jurassic. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. It's not chaotic, it's harmonious. An orchestra in which every note is both survival and celebration. A quirky thought makes you chuckle. Someday children will hold plastic toys shaped like these creatures, roaring and stomping across bedroom floors. They'll argue over which dinosaur was strongest, which flew fastest, which had the biggest teeth. Yet here, in their real world, the creatures don't care about winning arguments. They simply live, breathe, fight, nurture, and die. Their greatness isn't in their size or teeth, but in their persistence, in how thoroughly they filled their moment in time. You walk to the edge of a young river, its waters running high from recent rains. Along its banks, nests lie hidden, some empty, others filled with fragile eggs. You crouch and touch the warm soil, imagining hatchlings breaking free, squeaking into a world that is already changing beneath them. Will they live to see the forests of the Cretaceous? Or will they vanish, remembered only as bone pressed into stone? You don't know. No one does. But their existence, however brief, ripples outward all the same. As dusk approaches, the light shifts to a fiery orange, the same shade you've seen reflecting off volcanoes, off reefs, off storm clouds. It's the colour of endings, but also of beginnings. You sit on a boulder and watch the silhouettes of giants fade against the glowing sky. The air cools, the insects resume their buzzing, and the world feels both eternal and fleeting. The Jurassic curtain falls slowly, without drama, without explosion. It simply fades into the next act, leaving behind echoes of thunderous footsteps, shimmering reefs, storm-soaked plains, and skies filled with wings. You feel privileged to have walked through it, even if only in borrowed imagination. As night deepens, stars crowd the heavens, brighter than you've ever seen. You lie back, the fossil fern still clutched in your hand, and close your eyes. The world hums on, steady, unbothered. Eternal, you let the sound of crickets, the whisper of distant giants, and the rustle of cicadas lull you. The Jurassic has ended, but sleep carries you onward, softly, gently into the Cretaceous dawn,